Hi everyone, it's Antonio Diaz-Canis. Welcome to the second ever BlkOps podcast. Today we have Dr. Shannon O'Grady, the product director of Gnarly Nutrition, and she has a Ph.D. in biology through Nutritional Physiology. So we're pumped to have her on the show. Hi everyone, I have Shannon O'Grady here from Gnarly Nutrition. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Salt Lake City, Utah.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Antonio. I'm super psyched to be here.
Yeah, I told my wife I have to say stoked at least the first 30 seconds of this podcast, so we're very stoked to have you on the podcast. We don't use that word in Delaware, but it was a must when I was watching all the...
I know, it's so funny, East Coast, West Coast particular, but yeah.
And that's right, well you're from Virginia, so we have that East Coast bond.
Yeah.
It's kind of throwing all that off.
Completely.
Now, stoked, is that a climber term, or is that a West term, or what's going on with that?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's a West Coast term. Yeah, I would say that I've been out here for almost 20 years now, and it was definitely something I heard more often when I moved out here.
Sure. Is it ingrained in your vocabulary now, or do you just kind of like stay clear of it?
No, it sure is. It's ingrained. I've even been known to type it. So.
Oh, nice, nice. And that's all the podcast is on today. I just wanted to cover stoked, and we'll go from there.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon. I'm the Director of Product for Gnarly Nutrition. As the Director of Product, I get to formulate products, do all education, work with athletes to refine their performance in everyday nutrition. I'm an athlete myself, do some lifting, do a lot of jiu-jitsu.
You do a lot of things.
Yeah, do a little bit of running, a little bit of everything. So yeah, I love to talk to people of kind of like mind and efforts.
Sure.
and help them out as I can.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's so cool for our community to see someone such as yourself. When I first spoke, it's kind of funny how we met. We did our first ever podcast, and I jokingly put it on Instagram, and I said, to all our sponsors who haven't sponsored us yet, thank you so much. And I tagged Gnarly Nutrition. And then Eli, who, do we call him the director of Gnarly Nutrition?
He's our CEO, but he prefers to go by Narzar.
The Narzar, okay, so the Narzar. Well, that's funny. So I put it on Instagram, and I tagged Gnarly, and Eli got back to me in like 30 minutes, and I showed my wife. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Eli. And he said, it would be awesome if we had our product director, Shannon, on your podcast. And actually, a gym we've linked up with in Portland, Forge Performance, kind of jumped in and like seconded that, Jake. And I was like, okay, cool, awesome. And so then from there, it was just talking with you twice on the phone, a little bit on Instagram. And I was just like, wow, this girl's awesome. Yeah, and jiu-jitsu, mountain climber, endurance athlete. There's so many cool experiences you have that you can share with us, because we are a small, personal training studio in a sense, cross-training gym, whatever you want to call it, strength and conditioning facility. And we have right around 100 members right now, but we have so many different types of people that are attached to us. Some have goals of fat loss, some have goals of cardiovascular, endurance, powerlifting, and it's almost like you and I, we can cover all those bases today, because we have a wide body of experience in all those fields, so it's pretty cool. And the only thing I don't have is the endurance, so I'm really excited to talk with you more about that, and then a little bit about...
Yeah, that's kind of where I started, and that's what, I've always been interested in sports and nutrition, and kind of where the two overlap.
Sure.
I was always a runner, and in graduate school I started kind of doing longer runs. I started with marathons, and then got into ultra running, started getting into triathlon, did Ironman distance. And really, when you get into things that are of that length, you quickly learn how important nutrition is.
Absolutely.
And just kind of taking my science background and applying it to that, it was really interesting to test out a bunch of stuff and spend a lot of time doing research about what was the best thing to fuel me. So I really credit kind of that entry into endurance nutrition with kind of steering me in that direction.
Great. Yeah, and I haven't done anything, I did some CrossFit competitions. We just hosted what's called the Project Ski World Cup, and it was 8 events over a weekend, and it was all on the Concept 2 ski erg, and the amount of meters we performed, I don't know how many it was or executed, but it ended with a half marathon with a team that was like 20,000 meters. And I was telling everyone, like, you might want to add a little nutrition in the middle of this because your body's going to be searching for a fuel source. I'm not big on eating around competition. It's never been, I think it's a huge weakness of mine. I think with me, and I wanted to really discuss this with you today, is kind of my digestion is a huge part, how I feel. And I've heard you use the term gut health before. And I just am really interested in finding out more about that. But because digestion is so important to me, is when I'm working out or when I don't like to eat before I work out because I don't want my stomach kind of confused or I feel heavy in a sense. And so I was really interested in learning the science behind that, because if you're doing an all-day event, you're going to have to eat. And so there was some different fuel sources I used, and I would like to get your take on kind of how the science behind that and what you think. And
sure, yeah, we should chat on specifics on that, but I think too, kind of as an overarching theme to that, what I preach more than anything to people is that just like you train for a specific event, you also have to train your nutrition. So,
yeah, absolutely.
What you're going to do on game day, you have to practice over and over again in your preparation for game day.
Sure.
And sometimes that means training your body to be able to accept fuel.
Yeah.
And although at first it may take a little bit to get your body used to that, you slowly will be able to take in more calories, and taking in those calories is going to be, have a huge impact on your performance if you weren't previously.
Wow.
So,
So it's incredible. It's kind of like starting from scratch with your training when you're doing something wrong. And,
totally.
Going back to the beginning, you're like, well, no, now you got to use this muscle group you weren't using, but you're supposed to be using, and you got to learn what that feels like,
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I work with runners who are only allowed to take in, they thought for one point they could only take in 100 calories, per hour.
Sure.
Which, if you look at endurance athletes, they expend way more energy than that. And you don't want to be in a 500 calorie deficit when you're starting an endurance event. But slowly over time, they were able to build that up and double, almost triple it. So,
yeah, I mean, with like some espresso, I think you're good to go, right? You just go.
Right? Yeah.
That's always been like, they're like, what do you have in your stomach so far? I'm like, espresso and goodwill towards others. I wanted to kind of go over how I'm going to present myself today in this. I always call it my talk with the scientist today. We have the expert here, and I want to really come from a student kind of perspective. I want to really teach not just our members, but anyone who might be watching this. And like I said before, we have such a wide body of people that we service and that we speak to. I just think we can do so much good today. And I think we agreed beforehand, and Eli gave us a little advice on this, that we might have too much information to cover in one episode. So I'm really excited about this, and we'll do the best we can with today, and then we'll see where we take it in the future. And then we also made a promise, I think we were jokingly like, oh, you're bringing in Gnarly Nutrition product director and you're selling supplements at your gym. And I was just like, watch how we Jedi you. There's no commercial here. There's no sales here. Like, I think the two times we talked on the phone, the times I've spoken with Eli, it's just really this really good connection of like-minded people who have the same mission, I believe. And through education, people can make their own decisions after that.
Yep.
Great. Awesome. All right, Shannon, so obviously we're gym people, and I learned that about yourself as well, which I love, and I really love that you're going to be able to speak about the same things that our members and viewers are connected with. So where, we are a strength and conditioning facility. We do pretty much, we have no ceiling, we say. There's no gimmick to it. It's whatever we learn in the fitness industry, we add to our program. It's essentially like a 6 to 7 day program, with the 7th day being rest and recovery through yoga or whatever they want to do. But we add so much to it because we're constantly learning. But I think you go to a trainer in a gym that's very similar to that, and I just wanted to kind of talk on that for a little bit.
Yeah, so I train with Ann Miguel or Ann Kiss Stevens at, we call it Team Muscle Bus. It's kind of like
Team
a
Muscle Bus
cheap joke, but we've all grown to love it. Ann is a Strong First certified instructor. So Strong First, that's a very kettlebell oriented group, right? It is,
yes.
Yeah. They do a lot more than just kettlebell. There's barbell certifications and body weight certifications as well. But it's a amazing program, and that specifically, I've learned so much about kettlebell technique from Anne. She's a stellar instructor.
It's like when you see like a real kettlebell person, I always joked when I was teaching my people, I'm like, look guys, I'm not a kettlebell person, all right? So I'm gonna teach you how I use the kettlebell for fitness, which is correct, but it's totally different than a traditional way, in a sense, some of the movements, you know, because I believe that like most of the cleans are gonna come from an actual swing, whereas sometimes we'll teach it to them from the floor and stuff like that. This is just for our fitness junkies, you can understand this, but.
Yeah, and Anne and Team Muscle Bus, it's kind of a sister gym with Jim Jones. And there's a lot of crossover. Anne teaches at Jim Jones a little bit. I help teach nutrition as part of the Jim Jones Advanced Seminar. And,
awesome.
Gnarly Nutrition works really closely with Jim Jones as well.
Oh, cool.
We love their mission and what they're about, and really have to credit Jim Jones for, I mean, my experiences at Jim Jones have really kind of shaped a lot of the mental strength that that I've found useful in not just what we do in the gym, but you know, endurance running and jiu-jitsu and things like that.
That's awesome.
Because that's been great.
Yeah, and as a gym owner, you know, that's always my goal as well, is to try to, you know, strive to give our members that extra added thing where they're getting mental toughness, they're being more confident, and they're able to, you know, put that into other elements of their life. And we have this funny like circle thing with Jim Jones. A lot of the people we've been working with lately are connected to them in some fashion, and they were actually the first time I ever saw any type of like CrossFit in a sense was done from the 300 training montage that was Mark Twight and Jim Jones. And this was back before I was doing anything really. I wasn't a gym owner, but I was looking all around in fitness, and I saw the tire flips, and like you had a guy banded up running and touching a kettlebell, and I'm like, this is awesome. And then and I think the proof in the pudding was those guys' physiques in that movie.
They put out just have done a lot kind of in terms of not just physical preparation, mental preparation, you know, diet. They put a lot of worthwhile knowledge out there. Lisa Bouchard, the owner of Jim Jones, Mark's ex-wife, who together they really built that place to be what it is. She's actually the person that got me started on jiu-jitsu. So,
nice.
It's this interesting kind of like feedback and really close-knit community.
Awesome.
But it's been great.
Yeah, and they're kind of at the top of the food chain. Like when I see what they're achieving and what they're doing, you know, to even be like connected to them in any fashion, always a good thing for me as a small gym owner, because I've seen some of their programming and stuff like that, and it falls in line a lot with what we're doing here. Which is cool to see, because for a long time I kind of felt like a lone wolf out there, and I'm like, who's doing strength and conditioning that's not considered CrossFit, you know? Right. That's also not doing Bosu balls, and you know, so it's like, where do you stand and where do you fit in? And it always comes back to just being a total athlete, and like we talked about jokingly on the phone, you know, we tell our people, if you can just climb a mountain, I feel like our fitness program has made you successful. You know, if you're lean enough, you have the endurance and the strength to get up that mountain and carry your body weight, whether you're lean or not. But to carry your body weight is a really good test, I think. And you being a climber and in that climber community, I just thought that was a funny connection.
I know. When you told me that, I thought that was, I mean, it's nice that you're using that as the goal.
Sure.
But it also, like, just working out in the gym, I feel like no matter what your activity that you do, that you're training for potentially, injury prevention is a huge plus from gym training. And I've really noticed that the more time I spend in the gym, the less I end up getting injured.
So I wanted to talk with you to begin our, jump into nutrition about some of the misconceptions that we see out there. Maybe you could give me some of the big ones you've seen, and I can kind of throw some at you, and we'll go from there.
Sure. I mean, I think the glaring one is where kind of carbohydrates are in a phase where fats were in the 80s.
Sure. That's like my biggest one too, so I'm glad you're covering this.
Yeah. I mean, people are always looking for two things, right? An easy way to approach nutrition and get to, their ideal body weight or body composition. And there's really nothing easy about, that process. Yeah. And then they, in that, a lot of people try to vilify or demonize a particular food group. And while I think, we can say that as a society, we might be guilty of overeating things.
As Americans.
Right?
Yeah.
And looking for solutions to eating and food that are fast and quick and easy. And I think that's where we get caught up in overeating something like carbohydrates.
Right. Which is now basically made it a villain, you know?
Yeah. So when we are looking for fast things, that's when we choose things that are more likely to be highly processed. And in that processing, a lot of nutrients are removed. You can eat a lot more volume of food a lot more quickly. So then you're getting, you know, nutrient poor food. You're eating a lot of it, and you know, then we get into situations of overeating past a point of being full. Yeah. So I mean, I think that in and of itself is the problem with carbohydrates. And if we look at nutrient-dense carbohydrates, which vegetables are, you know, carbohydrate, and we try to get a lot of our carbohydrate sources from things that are close to the ground, like fruits and vegetables, and even really whole grains, then we're getting to a place where we're choosing things that are nutrient-dense, that are high in fiber, that take longer to digest, and therefore provide like a sustaining fuel throughout the course of our day.
Right. Kind of like an educated way of looking at what you're consuming and utilizing the fuel source. Yeah,
and it's not that simple carbohydrates or, you know, things like, you know, mangoes or fruits that are really high in sugars, or even things like energy gels or shot blocks don't have a role, especially if you're an athlete and you're trying to fuel something where glycogen or carbohydrate is the primary source. They do, but those are specifically around training and specifically for training, and it's really those nutrient-dense, fiber-rich, slow-digesting carbohydrates that we want to consume over the course of the day.
Sure.
So I think for the most part, you know, that would be my biggest...
and that's very much so as mine as well. You know, I've had that a lot where I've heard people come in and they're like, well, maybe I just stop eating carbs and stuff like that. And what we want to actually do in the gym is have them use the carbohydrates as their fuel source when they're here. But there's different workouts, of course, that you're going to tap into different resources with that. But I'm glad you brought that up as the biggest misconception, because I think we agree in that. I mean, there's a million other things, you know, that we could go into.
There are a million other things. I mean, my secondary one would be that, and it's kind of along the same lines. It's you know, somebody looking to make a change a quick change to body composition. So they're looking for something that's easy. Cutting out carbs, and the other big one is the ketogenic diet. I'm not anti-ketogenic diet. I'm definitely a person who thinks that different things work for different people, and some people feel better on that diet. I have a good friend who's a really high-performing jiu-jitsu athlete, which is a really high-intensity sport, and she does really well on that diet. But for the majority of people, it's going to be a hard diet to sustain, and because you're relying on fats, it's not a good choice for anybody that does a high intensity exercise, because no matter what your diet looks like, if you're tapping into anaerobic glycolysis or really what you do when you're in really high intensity workouts, your body can't use fat as a fuel. It uses carbohydrates as a fuel. So if there aren't enough carbohydrates around, your performance is going to suffer.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you touched on that, because we're going to carry that into when we speak about training very heavily. So awesome.
Okay, awesome.
All right, Shannon, so I'm glad we touched on that, because I want to carry that right over into kind of the daily structure for an everyday person when it comes to nutrition and hydration. And then I also want to tie that into someone who trains at least an hour a day. I'm not going to go into 2-a-days or any of that stuff, because while that's great for some people, it's not really the overall majority of people we're speaking to right now. And so I always say, yeah, whatever you want to do. I have people that come to my gym twice a day, and I'm like, all right, great for you. You know what I mean? I think 1 hour a day is perfectly fine. Otherwise, I would change my programming. I'm not knocking them. I'm just throwing that out there. So I just wanted to talk about maybe breakfast, lunch, dinner. And I'm not, by saying breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I'm not leaning on the fence of a person who believes you should have all 3 meals or that you shouldn't snack in the middle. There's so many things out there, especially it's kind of funny. One day I had an epiphany. I'm like, oh wow, we're all being like brainwashed to be bodybuilders, because all the gyms are set up in a bodybuilding template, at least for the past 5 years. You go to the YMCA, the local YMCA, or the big chain gyms, and it's all like isolation machines. And you're like, oh, okay. I guess bodybuilding was big, and so all these big gyms were created, and we go there trying to figure out what to do. And the bodybuilder diet is what? Snack every 2 hours all throughout the day.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's so many different things that people do out there. And I think the number one thing that I've learned is that everybody's different. And there's
I 100% agree.
Yeah. And I'm glad that, you know, we can agree on that, because I've been trying to tell people that, like, there is no one way. You know, it's about your performance. If you feel good and your performance is good, you're probably onto something there.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, on general, when I work with someone with nutrition, I usually start them out at the 3 meals a day with the snacks in between, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
And that's mainly because I want to make sure they're getting nutrient-dense foods throughout the course of the day. So if we look at like one of those meals, and I don't really think I separate breakfast, lunch, and dinner into different meal categories.
Sure.
You know, you can have breakfast for dinner, you can have dinner for breakfast. It doesn't,
dinner's great.
It totally doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But if we look at a meal in isolation, you know, I am a big believer in vegetables at every meal. So whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, you're getting really nutrient-dense foods, you're getting a good fiber content, which does a number of things. It is good for digestive health. So a lot of the bacteria in your gut, we can't as humans digest fiber, but the bacteria in our gut breaks down that fiber, releases nutrients, which then we secondarily absorb and benefit from.
Yeah.
It's also really good in terms of slowing digestion. Making you feel more satiated or full. Vegetables are usually higher in water content, so they're hydrating. And we're getting a lot of those micronutrients and minerals that we don't find in a lot of food.
But yeah, so you mentioned you look at each meal individually, and that you believe vegetables should be a part of every meal. And I'm a huge, that's something I believe in as well. Kind of like looking at it as a triangle, like a protein source, a vegetable.
So, for me, vegetables should be at the base of the triangle.
Yep.
Next should be protein. You know, good high quality proteins. I'm not, you know, saturated fat is another thing that got a bad name for a long time. I'm not against animal fat by any means. I'm also not like anti-vegetarian. You know, I try not to stand on a nutritional soapbox, but you really need to pay attention, you know, to the nutrition that you're getting. So if you're a vegetarian or vegan, you have to pay a little bit more attention to that protein piece, because it's a little bit harder to get. You know, and then on top of that would be kind of more refined carbohydrates, your starches potentially, which aren't necessarily refined but are absorbed differently than vegetables that are higher in fiber content, and then something like a grain. So, and then of course, you know, sweets are always at the top. Like, I'm not anti-dessert either.
But,
no. You know, sparingly. I think a big thing is a lot of people try to cut things like sugar completely out of their diet, and then you get this pendulum effect. You got to enjoy food, and if you deny yourself something like a sweet all the time, then you're going to end up binge eating. So, you know, vegetables first, protein, then we're looking at more refined carbohydrates, and then kind of sweets and sugars at the top.
Okay, great. And I just want to slide topics over to hydration, how hydration fits into that. And I think you covered it very well. I think people overcomplicate diets. And when I say diet, I just mean the nutrition that they're, you know, consuming in a day. I get so many different questions, and when I give them my answer, they don't want it. They want this super crazy, you know, I have jokes. I'm trying to behave today. When you were talking about vegans and protein source, I'm like, now you vegans, I don't have a vegan supplement, but you can go look out in the trash cans and find a protein source if you have to, because I don't know what you can eat for protein. And sorry to all the vegans, but that's, you gotta be real sometimes.
It's way more complicated. Sure.
But that's what I want to learn more about. I'm not ragging on vegans. I would love to learn more about that. And we have some vegans at our gym, and I'm always politely making fun of them because I'm a carnivore and I love meat. But I love having discussions. So if they came down next to me and just made me look stupid, I'd be perfectly fine with that. I've never been afraid to admit what I don't know. And what today is all about too is, you know, kind of showing that to my members that I don't know it all, but I do know some. And just because, you know, I don't have all the scientific terminology behind it, I have a body of life experience behind it. And I always go back to eat like your grandparents did. And that's just a good starter, right? Obviously, we know way more now, and we're spoiled as a culture where we can, not spoiled in a good way, where we can actually be like, oh, today I'm not going to eat carbs. Whereas back in the time, you know, back in the day, it was like, you don't eat that carb, you're not eating, you know?
Yeah, and I mean,
wait a minute, your name's Shannon O'Grady. I'm guessing you're Irish?
Yeah.
So we might have to talk about potatoes. Just hit the mic here.
Irish, yeah, totally. I mean, I think that grandparent thing hits on a good topic that even goes beyond like what food is on your plate. It's how you prepared that food. Like, did you cook it?
Sure.
Did you cook it from scratch? You know, where did you get your food?
Yep.
How, you know, what does your dinner experience look like? Do you eat in 5 minutes, or are you taking time to interact with who else is at your dinner table? And although those things seem like far removed from a lot of the weight loss goals people may have,
sure.
I think being more mindful about where you get your food, being more mindful about how quickly you rush through eating and whether or not you're actually enjoying the food, doing it well, interacting with who's at your table, all of those things can have an impact on how we view food, how we consume food, and how our body assimilates food.
And I think that just hearing that, I'm like, that is the Jedi trick of today. Like what you just said is pretty much just opened my eyes to this podcast and the importance of it. And it's like, I tell people, you're doing more damage with your relationship to food than what you're actually consuming. You're so stressed out about what you've eaten, it's doing way more damage than what you've actually eaten.
Yeah, I mean, and I think making little, if you're on that path where you're trying to improve body composition or you have some kind of weight loss goal, I try to encourage everybody I work with to make small tweaks that really are almost, you know, unnoticeable because they feel so much of, you know, they feel so much part of their lifestyle.
Sure.
Because that's something that you're going to be able to maintain.
Exactly.
That's something that's going to become part of your new relationship with food and how you go about the course of your day.
Yeah.
So,
and there's so much good you can do. Like that's why this topic is so important, because oh my gosh, everyone, it's not with my gym members, but any party I go to, and just hearing the way people talk about food and how guilty they feel, and it's just like, good Lord. And they won't listen to a word you have to say. They've been miserable their whole life doing it a certain way, listening to every guru on television, and then you happen to say one thing, and they're like, oh no, that doesn't work. And like, okay, so you've been doing it your way for how long now? 50 years, 40 years, 30 years? You've been completely miserable and nothing works? Yep, but you're not gonna listen to a word I said. Okay, roger that. Good to go.
And, you know, and that gets back to people looking for this like easy solution.
Yeah. No, there's got to be.
That it's necessarily hard, but it's never going to be an easy and fast solution, because changing behavior takes time and it takes commitment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think like the word in and of itself, right? Diet. People always associate the word diet with weight loss. Diet is also just, you know, a word we can use as a descriptor of nutrition.
Absolutely.
So, I think looking at it as a lifestyle change and less of like this, you know, 30-day commitment that you're going to make to, you know, whatever is.
And that's why I've never done challenges, because like, what am I teaching them? You know, it might be successful for our gym to a degree, but that's not my mission. My mission is not to give you a 30-day, you change your life, yay. No, this is your whole life. I want you to eat happy and have freedom with your diet and work out and be fun, and then teach your children this. And
exactly.
Yeah, so great. Well, I'm glad we covered that. I want to veer over into hydration because this is something that I struggle with. I enjoy whiskey, and I'm sure that has an effect on my hydration as well. And we share that common bond we spoke about. But yeah, so you know, we talked about a daily structure for people, and the quality of what you're doing, what you're eating, and the way you look at your diet, which is your nutrition. And could you maybe touch on hydration throughout the day, and then we'll throw in, you know, training and how it affects that.
Sure. So I'm a big believer in drinking water. So a lot of people, you know, you hear this like 8 glasses of water a day, and I'm not someone that thinks that you need to be hitting a certain amount of ounces, or you need to carry like a gallon jug of water with you everywhere.
Right.
I think for the most part, drinking to thirst is a really great way to kind of monitor your water intake over the course of the day. But I think also realizing that a lot of people drink, you know, liquids that are really high in calories, and your body takes in those calories so quickly, and unless you're going to turn around and work out, you know, it's typically not a good thing.
Yeah.
So drinking water, you know, making sure if you're thirsty, you're drinking water throughout the day. If you're, you know, planning on training a lot, and that training is going to involve a lot of sweat, then obviously you're going to need to consume more, you know, in a given day. Endurance efforts are a completely different ball of wax, and I have a whole
I'm sure, that's a whole,
you know, theory around hydration strategy for things that are really long, because that's so important in terms of performance, health, replacing electrolytes, and things like that.
Yeah, and that's something I'm really kind of simple on. It's funny you said you believe in drinking water to start this, and I was a drill instructor, and we make the recruits drink so much water in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And I always would joke with them, even though they didn't. You're not really joking because you're the disciplinarian, but I created up a cadence where I would say something, they would repeat it, and I would say drink water, and they would go live, and I would say don't drink water, and they would go die, and. But that's it, that's literally the answer. What's the first thing you do when you go to the hospital when you're in bad shape? They link you up to a fluid source.
A fluid. And an important thing to realize is that if you are an endurance athlete, if you're running something that, is hours, is going to take hours and you're sweating a lot, then drinking just water is not great. You run into things like hyponatremia. You're not replacing the sodium and other electrolytes you're losing in sweat. And it can lead to serious health consequences. So in cases like that, then yes, you need to be taking in water that also contains electrolytes. So that. Do
you recommend that to your everyday, maybe trains 1 hour a day, that they put, people have that Himalayan rock salt and all that stuff. Is there anything that you would put in water through the day to kind of aid your hydration?
We get enough salt in our diet that if you're working out an hour a day, I don't really think you need to be replacing electrolytes. It's not a bad idea to do. It's unless you have a really high sodium diet and then you have another source of sodium in terms of what you're drinking, then you may want to watch out. Sodium content is obviously the cause of a lot of major health issues.
Yeah.
So, be aware of that. But for the most part, if your training is about an hour a day, you don't need to worry about taking in electrolytes.
Awesome.
I think once we get to 2 hours, especially if you happen to sweat a lot, that's when it can start to have impacts on performance and things like that.
Okay. Since I've begun working with you, I went a year with no supplementation, and now I'm going to take a year where I'm actually going to do supplementation, and I'm so pumped that we have this company and you can educate me on the products to make those decisions. So if you could speak on those elements of training, how they're fueled, and then intro to the Gnarly products.
Sure, sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to disagree with you just a little bit.
Okay. How dare you? This podcast is over.
I totally agree with the high intensity training and the afterburn and that having an impact on weight loss. I think I would throw into that equation, and I'm gonna back it up with a little science. I would also put in that kind of low intensity, longer workout is pretty important to fat loss as well. If you can imagine, intensity, as we increase intensity, looking at either fat use or carbohydrate use, because those are the two main fuels. Protein's mainly a building block for muscle. We do use amino acids for energy sometimes, but rarely, and it's only if we're really low in other energy sources. So if you look as we increase intensity, whether we use fat or carbohydrate more, at lower intensities before we hit the aerobic threshold, you're really using fat predominantly. So like even now, you and I sitting here talking, our body's using fat to kind of fuel our metabolism. As you increase in intensity, you kind of see more of a 50-50 split, not exactly, but you're getting some energy from fat and you're getting some energy from carbohydrates.
Got it.
As I mentioned before when we briefly talked about the ketogenic diet, as you increase intensity and you get over this anaerobic threshold, you're really using predominantly carbohydrate, hardly any fat at that point. So we're moving from really low intensity aerobic efforts to higher intensity aerobic efforts, and then to a point where anaerobic metabolism is really fueling most of our energy production. So from mostly fat to a little bit of both to mostly carbohydrate.
Got it.
So people that are trying to lose weight, you also really want to build muscle, and so strength work comes into building muscle. High intensity work is important because I think it also builds cardiovascular efficiencies, which also feeds back into fat use. It also does the afterburn, so your metabolism stays elevated for longer when you're done exercising, so that can be important for fat use. And then that low intensity exercise for long periods of time, and in my running days we called it LSD, or long slow distance. That builds cardiovascular efficiency, and you're getting most of the energy that you're using to fuel those efforts from stored fat.
Great.
So, you know, all three of those really important
Sure.
for changing body composition.
Awesome. And I do feel like we are definitely going to have another podcast with you on where we can go deeper into these things, because I'm sure people are like, whoa, this is incredible. I want to go deeper into that. No. And so myself included, you know, I want to be teaching science in my gym. You know, the gym is a laboratory. So the more I learn, I have no ego involved. You know, if something is better, I'm going to put it into effect immediately. And it's just really cool to hear all this from a scientist, because I always believed I was kind of on the path, you know. And but that is something that we can go so much deeper into in the future, because the whole, especially with the anaerobic versus aerobic, and you know, some of the ways people are doing those types of training, just all one or all the other, and not really open to trying new things. And does that sound like something that you do with your training, where you have those elements that we spoke about, or is there something we're missing? I mean, we obviously layer in tons of mobility and all that kind of stuff to make sure longevity is achieved.
Yeah, so definitely what I try to integrate into my training, both for building strength, I try to do a lot of mobility for building flexibility. That's definitely a weakness for me. Jiu-jitsu's actually helped a lot with that, but something that I can improve in my, you know, daily practice. But yeah, you know, we were talking about deadlifting earlier, and you know, so I do, you know, some Olympic lifts where I am focusing on building strength, and you know, sometimes that looks like a 1 rep max. Sometimes it looks more like a, you know, 4x4. It varies, you know. Anne has definitely rhyme and reason to how she structures our workouts. And sometimes I am first and foremost, as an athlete, was always a runner. So sometimes more for mental clarity and time for myself, you know, I'll head out in the mountains for a run for a couple hours. And I think they're all important for the body. Absolutely. And they can look like different things for different people.
And it's real life too. You know, you don't just train in a perfectly spaced barbell with perfectly
totally. I mean, move more. Right?
That's the overall message.
People just need to move more. Absolutely. Most of us sit at a desk. I know I do for a good part of the day. So if I can walk to the store, you know, if my family's going out to dinner and we can find a restaurant that we can all walk to, you know, just trying to find places to move more throughout my day.
And you know, it's such a simple thing for people, but there's so many people that never ever, you know, put that into practice. And it's like, just park further away, or you're at a hill with a kid, run up it. You know, don't walk up it, run up it. You know what I mean? Get that little victory for yourself. We always try to say, we're going to try to move you like you did when you were young. We're not going to get there. We're not going to be able to throw you out a 3-story building and be able to bounce back like you would when you were young, but we're going to try to get you back to moving. And I had a really bad back injury, and I very seldom sit down. So sitting on a couch makes me feel guilty. So I pretty much excluded, and I'm lucky to be able to do that. I had to open a gym so that I could walk, so that I was able to actually not work at a job where I had to sit down, because I just couldn't do it. Well, great. Well, I wanted to take that directly into the supplementation. When, you know, the supplementation, how it can aid your training, and the Gnarly products. At BlkOps, we're about to do our second order, which is really awesome. We just started with you guys, and so we're going to take this knowledge right to our members. We have the whey protein. We have vegan, so I'm going to buy some of the vegan protein. We have the hydrate, which we didn't actually use the hydrate. We did get samples from you guys. And Eli was like, you really should have jumped on that hydrate during that
down at
event.
Like 10,000 meters.
Sure, 21,000. So it was, and that was just one event. So there was probably like, good Lord, I don't know how many over the course of the 2 days. And then we have the pre-workout, and then we have the, what's the last one I'm missing? BCAAs, which I think is actually the most important. So so if you could jump on them and give me your take on that.
Sure. So I'd say the products that I probably recommend first when someone comes to me and they're like, all right, what should I start taking to improve my performance as an athlete? I always start with the BCAAs and protein. They work synergistically. Got to give a little science background to kind of explain that. But so protein's made up of amino acids, obviously. The essential amino acids are the ones that we have to get from our diet.
Got it.
So that's important for a number of reasons, because the protein you choose as an athlete should be really high in essential amino acids. the essential amino acids. 3 of them are the branched chain amino acids. So once again, as an athlete, you should be choosing proteins that are really high in BCAAs. And a lot of people, getting to nutritional misconceptions.
Yeah.
A lot of people these days are choosing what I like to call fad proteins. An example of that would be collagen protein, which is actually really low in essential amino acids and really low in branched chain amino acids. So although it is a protein, it's not an ideal protein for an athlete.
Right.
Yeah. So whey is kind of the gold standard. Gnarly, we really believe in sourcing high quality. Hold on. Sorry.
It's all good. That's the beauty of doing a laptop podcast.
Yeah. So at Gnarly, we really believe in sourcing high quality whey. So we use a New Zealand grass-fed whey. We know there's no GMOs in our protein. We know the cows weren't given, hormones or antibiotics. But really, if you're looking for a protein and you are okay with consuming animal-derived products, I'd recommend whey protein. Sure. Really high in essential amino acids, really high in branched chain amino acids. Our vegan protein, we use a pea protein isolate, and then cranberry seed protein and chia seed protein as well. Also really high in branched chain amino acids. There's this misconception, again, that vegetarian proteins or vegetable-based proteins are incomplete, meaning they don't contain all essential amino acids, and that's not true. Pea protein and actually soy protein are really high in branched chain amino acids. But if you combine them with a grain-based protein like rice protein, they get an even better profile. So they get closer to something like whey, but they're not incomplete.
Yeah.
So Gnarly, we use pea protein isolate, and it mixes really well. People really like it, and it's a really good vegetable-based protein for athletes.
Awesome.
So then where do the BCAAs come in? If you're choosing a high-quality protein, why even take BCAAs? Well, optimal protein intake for an athlete is kind of hard for people to get to with our busy lives. But studies have shown that to keep amino acid levels in your body high throughout the day, it's ideal to consume kind of moderate amounts of protein in the 20 to 25 gram range every 3 to 4 hours.
Okay.
So they did studies looking at smaller doses consumed more frequently, or larger doses kind of skewed to the beginning of the end of the day. And they compared it with that 20 gram dose every 3 to 4 hours. And what they found is muscle protein synthesis was higher in groups that consume that moderate amount pretty regularly. And that's because you're optimizing the level of branched chain amino acids in your body. So if life gets in the way and you're not able to do this, eat protein every 3 to 4 hours, which can be hard.
Sure.
Branched chain amino acids are a great way to make sure you're getting those amino acids in your body.
And now when you're doing your BCAAs, it's generally, I like to take them in the beginning, maybe before, and I like to drink it actually during.
So that's exactly.
Yeah.
BCAAs can do a couple of things. They can decrease what's called delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS. That's that 2 day out, all of a sudden I can't walk down the stairs kind of feeling. They also help stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So by taking them before and during, you really prevent excessive muscle damage and help decrease that muscle, that 2 day after muscle burn. And then following up with a high quality protein after, you get the BCAAs, but you also get the other essential amino acids that really are the building blocks of muscle.
Sure.
So sandwiching workouts between those two is what I recommend.
Yeah.
BCAAs are also a great way, like if you're doing a fasted workout, they're a great thing to take when maybe you haven't had protein in a while, and so your body's really low. BCAAs typically, depending on the formula, ours don't break a fast.
Yeah. We actually have some members questions coming to you at the end, and they want to talk about intermittent fasting. So when you said break your fast, I'm like, oh Lord, you know what I mean? So that's fun to talk about.
So people use them for that reason too. That if they're going to work out,
it aids them while they're on that diet.
They don't really want to totally have a hard time with recovery after a hard workout. They're a great option for that too.
Great.
So BCAAs are a good segment for pre-workout because our pre-workout actually contains BCAAs, kind of getting back to taking them prior to training.
Yeah.
It also has beta-alanine in it, which in our bodies converts to something called carnosine, which is the buffer. So that acidity that you may feel building up in really hard workouts kind of helps damper that. So it helps with endurance.
Sure.
Also have citrulline malate, which is really great for vasodilation. So feeds into the nitric oxide pathway and really helps with blood flow to working muscles.
Can't wait to use all these words.
Yeah, and then a ton of caffeine, right? So
yeah.
We are coming out with a decaf version of our pre-workout.
Nobody wants that.
Probably in the next.
No, I was kidding. I said nobody wants that.
No, nobody wants it. Yeah, so we actually have a lot of people who are like, I work out at night.
Oh no, I know it's entirely. And I heard you say that on a previous podcast that you can't take caffeine after a certain hour. I'm like so hyper that, you know, anything past 12 and even 12 doesn't work. So
right. So yeah, so that product will be great. But the pre-workout as it stands now has 180 milligrams of caffeine per serving. So two big cups of coffee.
Sure.
Yeah, so that product's great for training before your training. And then the hydrate, which we talked a little bit about earlier, really for efforts when you're going to be sweating a lot. So your ski air
sure.
Event would have been perfect for that. And that product's really built around replacing water and replacing the electrolytes we lose in sweat. Right?
So that would be kind of like your hydration bounce back.
Yeah. So it's not like a Gatorade where
right.
I mean, Gatorade you get electrolytes, but Gatorade also has a lot of sugar.
A whole bunch of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and those things can actually affect how your body absorbs things and lead to gastrointestinal distress. So our product has a little bit of sugar in it because the sugar actually improves how your body absorbs the water. But then it has electrolytes like sodium and magnesium and chloride. It has some B vitamins, which athletes are usually pretty low in.
Yeah.
So really just meant to replace what you lose in sweat.
Great. So, you know, we're coming to the conclusion of this. I want to do some members' questions, but I just wanted to thank you so much because this has been incredible, and I'm definitely like pumped to talk again soon. But yeah, so when we talked about the podcast, I was like, you know, I don't want to come off too bro during this thing, but I also want to cover bases that our members will find value in. So I kind of polled our members on Facebook, and I just wanted to throw a couple of those questions at you. And they're good questions that you can have some fun with. But Suzanne, one of my favorite female athletes, she said the unique issues, challenges of building and maintaining muscle as we age, and can supplementation safely help? And she said she's asking for a friend.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm 40, so I'm getting up there myself, and I understand where you're coming from, where your friend's coming from, Suzanne. And I think the BCAAs and protein, which we talked about, so making sure your protein intake is consistent throughout the day, so that 20 to 30 gram dose, whether it's from whole foods or supplements, and trying to get that every 3 to 4 hours, and then using BCAAs before training and protein after. So it's if we're looking at it from a nutrition end, making sure we're getting enough of the building blocks in our diet, and then if we're looking for it from a training end, making sure you're providing enough of the stimulus. So really doing maybe a little more strength workouts.
Sure. Never missing them. Yeah.
Power and endurance workouts. So your body gets the signal to build more muscle, and then because of your nutritional choices, the amino acids are there to
stimulate the change. Awesome.
Yeah.
We have a little funny one for you. Kelly, she's a mother, and she said, "How do I avoid eating all my children's chicken nuggets?"
Oh, Kelly, I feel ya. So I have a 3.5-year-old and a 6-year-old, and it's that and Annie's mac and cheese. They're like the worst. Annie's
mac and cheese is no joke.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
So what I try to do, I have the same problem, and I'm not perfect for any means by nutrition. You know, I just try to make good decisions.
Sure.
So I know that those are things that I want to eat, and so I try to have a snack
beforehand
that I am happy with beforehand, so that I'm not, hungry. So maybe one spoonful doesn't turn into 8 spoonfuls, or maybe one chicken nugget doesn't turn into 8 chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
I'm okay with a spoonful of mac and cheese here and there, but I'm less likely to overeat it if I am full and I feel good about what I just ate.
Yeah, it's like going to the grocery store hungry. Not a good idea. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
All right, and then Mandy, this girl has been awesome. She's gotten very strong over this past year working with us. Very strong girl, and she's been working on her conditioning and competition as well. She said, what is the #1 supplement that everyone who's consistently working out, eating healthy should be taking? Also, what supplements are not worth it, don't really give an ROI, return of investment? And then a quick thought on creatine, and I think we could lay that right into how it helps strength training.
So I'm going to once again preach BCAAs and a high quality protein. I think, you know, there's not really rocket science around it. It's not doing anything special, but if you're really trying to build strength, then you need to give your body what it needs to build that strength. And too many people either don't consume protein in the right way or are choosing proteins that aren't really good choices for athletes.
Yeah.
In terms of other supplements that are out there that are kind of a waste of money, anything that has a proprietary blend or has a fancy name associated with it, they're not taking anything but gnarly anyways, so you don't even have to discuss that, Shannon. I hope not.
Well, that's kind of like when I've never sold supplements, so then like if someone takes another supplement, I'm like, this is the only thing I've recommended to you in 3 years, you know what I mean? You're just going to choose not to listen to it, then so be it, but we're not going to talk about that other nonsense, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good, easy litmus test. Like if you pick up something
and you can't
either it makes this promise that's hard to believe, or, you know, you don't really know how much is in the product because it's part of a proprietary blend. It's definitely a bad choice and probably a waste of money.
Okay, and then just your thoughts on creatine?
Huge fan of creatine. It's probably one of the better studied, more effective supplements out there. I think it also always gets associated with building strength, but I've worked with a lot of endurance athletes where power is a big thing, like mountain biking would be an example, where creatine can be a benefit because you're basically capitalizing on your body's ability to produce energy quickly in power-based movements. And you're extending a window, and once again, we can talk about this.
Sure, yeah. I think we definitely have to do another podcast to cover all this stuff.
Extending this window of power generation, which in most people is like up to 8 seconds to potentially 10 to 12 seconds. So creatine in and of itself, doesn't give you extra strength. But if you take creatine consistently and you are strength training and providing that stimulus, you can see huge gains in strength.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The last question we have is just, you know, and like I said, we're going to speak on this in the future, but what are your thoughts for our early morning athletes, people that train first thing in the morning, and then kind of the intermittent fasting? Is there science behind that? Two of our members were asking about that, so that's our final question.
Okay, so people that train in the morning, it really depends on the nature of the workout.
Right.
If you're doing anything that is really kind of tapping into carbohydrate stores, so high intensity, it's not a bad idea to have a little bit of carbohydrate beforehand, half of a banana, but it's also not necessary. Just kind of have to figure out what your goals are. If you're going in to try to PR, you know, on your 2,000 meter row or something like that, then yes. Have a half a banana before you do that. About 20 minutes beforehand. If you're going in and you're just going to do a workout and do the best that you can and you don't have any performance goals, you just want to burn calories, not always necessary. You know, in that case, BCAAs or something I take just for recovery is good. But does that kind of answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, I think it does. And I can help our members with this as well with everything I've learned today. So, and my experiences,
And then as far as the intermittent fasting, this and time-restricted eating are a big topic right now. I think they're a good idea. I think also you need to figure out what works for you. As we said, everybody's different. I think a lot of the concepts are good in that a lot of people forget what it feels like to feel hungry and don't really listen to hunger cues in terms of when to eat. And so kind of condensing our eating window or delaying the time between eating can help do that. Like, are you really hungry, or are you just eating because the clock on the wall says it's
told you, or
time?
And you're just supposed
There's
to.
also something to giving our digestive system a break.
Right.
And there's a lot of research behind that. And then also something to, if you're eating in a more time-restricted window, you're less likely to take in as many calories. But that's more looking at total calorie intake and less looking at something special about you know, an 8-hour, 10-hour window as opposed to a 14 to 16-hour window. So I think we can benefit from it, and there is research behind it. Make sure like it's sustainable, make sure it works for you, and you know, make sure that you understand how training fits into that schedule, and that you're giving your body what it needs to perform.
And that's the science, you know, it's test and repeat, you know.
Yep.
And just judge it off your performance. Well, awesome. So Shannon, I just wanted to wrap it all up. We've touched on so many things, and I'm just really excited for the future with you.
Me too.
And I think you guys shown us that energy that you were actually looking forward to speaking with us, and we're just like a little small gym in Delaware. So we were really honored and thankful that you gave us your time today, and honored that Eli thought highly enough of us to recommend that you come on our podcast. But yeah, I think the future's looking really bright for us, and I'm really thankful that you've done this for us. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Antonio. It was a blast. And like you know, we said earlier, like I'd love to come on again. And
sure. We have so much to go over. Yeah. Absolutely.
It was a blast.
Great. Well, that's awesome to hear. I know our community's gonna be super pumped, and we have marching orders now. Obviously, we have a lot more we can cover in the future, but we'll go and implement these things, and I'll be helping them as well. And it's good to have that science backing the words I'm giving them. And yeah, it's gonna be great. So obviously, everyone, where can people find out more about Gnarly Nutrition?
Sure, our website is gognarly.com. Also find us on Instagram and Facebook. And yeah, if you know have a question, can feel free to contact us via the website. I'm usually the person that answers most of those questions, so you get an email back from me, and you know, we can chat. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Shannon, and everybody. You know where to find us, www.blkopsfitness.com, and also on Instagram at blkopsfitness.com. So thanks again, Shannon, and please tell Eli we said hi, and we hope his little child is feeling better. Okay, definitely. Thanks, Antonio. All right, Shannon, take care.